All right, welcome back, everybody. Lab 5, here we go. All right, let's kind of start it off. As I said there, anybody got any pressing questions from, I mean, we can make it all the way back to number 1 if you want, but if you've got anything that we covered kind of last week, feel free to chime in. We are going to go back over templates again. After the amount of email I got after last week from people asking, can you please just go through the template head to toe and actually do the whole input list? I decided to back off a little bit and do that. So we're going to do that today. We're going to take this, kind of start again and go from head to toe. And maybe I'll try to explain how I do it a little deeper and some of the variables that are in place when you do it that you're going to run into that are likely going to mess with you. And similar sort of thing, we can certainly talk about it for you guys that are working in performing arts centers or churches, et cetera, where you're relying very heavily on templates. I'd be actually interested to hear from you and how you're managing it, because in those situations, you might be working a little differently in that you have a common core of musicians. You might have a common set of songs. How are you doing that? And working with volunteers as well. Please, just a reminder, please mute your mics if you are not speaking, because I can hear every rustle of paper that you do right now. So please. All right, so any questions? You're welcome to just kind of jump in on your mic if you've got questions over the last couple of things we've covered. If not, we'll jump right into it here. If I can find input list, here we go. All right. Well, if there are no questions, we will jump into it here. Let me get out of this. All right. So just to kind of recap, the concept here, at least in the context that we've been talking for a few weeks, was taking advantage of a template so that you could do a pre-time aligned show file where if you were doing a lot of inserting of external inserts into your input chain, you could then realign those channels and come to the show ready to go with them. That's certainly, if you're going to take that approach and do it, I would certainly recommend that you use a template to do that. But I don't want to lead you to believe that that's the only reason to use a template. I was certainly using a template way before I ever started doing that on my show files, and would recommend that everybody try to buy into that mindset. As I said last week, if you haven't kind of bought into this concept of template, you're really missing one of the great features of digital in terms of portability and being able to move things round and round. Now, I mean, I kind of have the luxury of working almost exclusively on VENEU products, but I can tell you without question that if I was in a situation where I was working from, console to console, different console manufacturers, et cetera, I would be gathering and building show file templates for all of those consoles, using a lot of the same principles you're going to see today. The goal here ultimately in using a template, please don't fall into this trap of thinking, well, all of my shows are going to sound the same. Just nothing could be further from the truth, right? Every show is going to have its own thing. You're going to make every show have its own thing. You're just going to get to it and make it a lot better, a lot faster, right? You're going to take away all this kind of repetitive work that you would have to do every time you set up your console. We want to get rid of some of that stuff and get it where you don't, kind of build these little landmines in for yourself and, can trip yourselves up. I know, just, I'm going to speak personally for me now. I know since I started really adopting template and working that way, I make way fewer routing mistakes, setup mistakes, all kinds of things, because there's parts of it that I can just absolutely count on as we go forward. All right. So let's go back to this screen here, and I'm going to get over here and take you back to the overview just to kind of reinforce what we're doing here. So as you see here on this S6L, this is an E6L 192 engine. Has 192 inputs available to it, input processing channels available to it. And I've got the first 64 slots, as it turns out, with open channels. These are unassigned, unprogrammed, anything. But down in here in 129 through 180 something-ish, I've got all the stuff that I've pre-built ready to go. So if I slide across some of these, you'll see that's my kick out channel, my kick in. Anything that is in green is going to be drum related. As we go down here, I got some percussion. I got a bunch of percussion pre-built. And these all came from previous show files that I've done over time, right? This has all been built over time where I've just captured these things and said, well, okay, yeah, if I run into that again, I want to be ready. Same thing for bass guitar and bass DI. Here's some regular electric guitar stuff, a bunch of keyboards, a bunch of strings. I've kind of cultivated all the string channels that I've done from close mic'd orchestras, etc. And we're going to use all of those today because this is a big show that we're going to load and build here. So all of these are kind of pre-built, and the key here is that these inputs are not only pre-built in terms of their equalization and their processing, which I'm not married to by any stretch of the imagination. I just want to have a good starting point. But the key part of it is all their routing and all their parallel paths, everything are already built and assigned, right? If I turn on, if I have signal coming into one of those channels, it should make it all the way through to the output that is going to go to the PA. I don't have to think about how I got it there, whatever, it's already done, right? I don't have to rebuild those paths. And even if I copy and paste, let's say maybe I end up with a third bass drum mic or whatever, if I copy that channel, paste it to another channel, then all that routing comes along with it. Any VCA assignments that were there come with it, et cetera, right? I don't really have to think too badly about it or too hard about it. So a question came up in the email was, well, what happens if you're on a smaller engine than 192, right? What happens then? Well, I just reduce the overall processing channel count. Now, notice I have all my stuff pushed down to the end here, right? So I'm kind of starting at the very last channel and working my way back in terms of processing channels here. So I would know that I've got to get it within 112 processing channels if I'm going to work on that small engine, right? So I'm certainly going to get rid of probably almost all of my blank channels. I'm going to keep the channels I've pre-built and push them up to the top and try to get it all inside 112. If I can't get it inside of 112, then I've got to sacrifice things that are luxuries, that I can't, that I won't have enough inputs for. I might have to give away some parallel processing or something like that to fit inside that 112, right? But I can do all that in standalone software and get that ready to go. So I'm just, sorry, I just got caught by one of the texts here. I want to just read this and make sure. Zero out and just on the VENEU. You're close. Jared Koopman, you're asking about do I zero out EQs, et cetera. I don't. I may, if I turn on the input with the previous show's EQ sitting on there and it just sounds completely out of whack, of course, I'm going to readdress it. But if I'm tight for time, I mean, it's like, okay, turn on the console and the band is going to walk on stage, I probably will leave those EQ curves in there just to get a head start on it and then kind of work my way back to them, right? The idea here is to save time and be able to get ready to go really, really fast. If you have time to get in and do some finesse on it, whether it's in line check or whatever, then of course you're going to do it. Like I said, I'm not married to any of these settings. What I'm married to is the routing and the layout that I'm going to create, okay? All right, so let's see here. Let me just check my notes here. So let's, maybe before we get into it, let's go over this because I've kind of put this together thinking about you guys, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about this. So just kind of a template's best practices here. All right, let's just go over this really quick, and maybe we'll review this when we're done here. So, I try to always base a template on an actual show file or components from an actual show file. Stuff that has been tested under fire. Those are going to be things that you can rely on if you've got them sorted out. Rely on your template to get you to a good starting place. It's not a replacement for the work, right? You still have to do the work. And there's a fair amount of work still to be done, but it's stuff that would always be done on site. What you don't want to necessarily do, in my opinion, is get there and have to redo all of these routing and VCA assignment, blah, 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 tasks on site every time you show up, especially if it's, well, I mean, I'm going to, this was all built from a rock and roll template, and we're going to use it on an orchestra plus, band show here. So you'll see that it actually works. Finally, don't pre-designate your 48-volt Phantom, right, in your template. Wait till you get on site. You don't want to have things plugged up in Phantom that might hurt something that are going to be plugged into it. So, I don't do any of that kind of stuff. I don't take any preamp levels at their stored settings. I will usually, if I know I'm going to have a line check, at least I will almost always zero out preamp settings. And somebody asked a question in the chat, how do you set your preamps? Can you talk about how to do that? Which I'll of course show you how I do that, or give you my approach to doing it. Try to develop a consistent path to your drive system, right? I mean, leaving immersive out of the conversation for a few minutes here. All show files at some point are going to get to an either mono or a stereo output, right? It's just how far down the chain you want to do that. Do you want to stop at your left-right bus, or do you want to make it go all the way through your matrices and be set up to drive a PA system from the matrix outputs on your console? I do that. I set up mine all the way through matrices. If by chance I get someplace and they don't want me to drive the PA system from the console, then I just back up to a left-right output and give that to them, maybe a sub output. Whatever, but it doesn't affect the template. It's just how deep you're going to use it on your given day. Yeah, the more you can prepare and rely on, this is a truism here, the more you'll actually accomplish in setting up your actual mixes, right? Because you won't get distracted doing all these other kind of janitorial issues on the console. You can really focus on working on your mixes and working on your pieces of the band to get them to sound right. Yep. This is an important one here. If you're deploying your show file for use by other people, and I'm kind of looking directly at churches and performing arts centers here, where you might have somebody administrating a template and getting it to their people to work with, that requires some evaluation of the people that you're going to have working, right? And you kind of want to play to both their strengths and their weaknesses there, right? If their weakness is in gain structure, you're going to want to pay more attention to input gains, et cetera, or do some training with them on how to best use that template. Also, maybe try to find out how they want to work on a given thing and maybe see if you can massage things into that to do it. But, having a template, I will say this, what I have seen over 15 years of people trying to do this, just having a template and forcing, people that are volunteers, et cetera, to work it, doesn't necessarily always yield the best results. You got to put the human element in there somewhere, and create some teamwork there and create some agreement on how everybody is going to do this. I've also run into this situation working with sound companies where I've met with a sound company and done training with them, and they've wanted to develop a template system so that when they go out on a show, because more often than not, when they're going out and they're going to be mixing, a headliner will be involved that will have their own guy, et cetera, will mix, and then they will be on the task to mix opening acts, et cetera. And a lot of times, they're having to build these show files from the ground up with the absolute least amount of time, sometimes not even a sound check. So, they would be really, really well served by using templates if they can get going with it. So that's worked out pretty well for them. It's made them rethink a little bit how they want to do it, but I think it's worked out really well for them. Okay, so just keep those things in mind as we go forward here. All right. Okay, so the first move is, once we got our template opened up and stuff, is to take a look at our input list and see what we're going to be doing. And I apologize, but I don't have the ability to put this input list up on screen. I may try to share it with you on the in the Google Docs if you want to kind of look through it and get some sense of it. But I'm going to give you just a verbal rundown of what we're going to put in place today. We have got a large show here. We've got a big orchestra. We've got a band sitting in front of it, a sizable band with big percussion rig sitting in front of it, multiple guitar players, a lot of keyboards. Let's see what else we got here. And on top of it, it's a TV show, so we're going to have a lot of production elements that go with it. So we'll just work off of this initial list. And I actually know this show, it actually changed after this list, but we'll work from here today just to get the idea. All right. All right, so I can tell you from the list that inputs 1 through 27 are all orchestra inputs. All right, so I'll read them off to you. 1 through 8 is first violins. 9 through 14 is second violins. 15 through 20 is violas. 21 through 24 is cellos. 25 through 27 is bass. All right, so let's go get that in place right away. Let's go take a look at what that looks like. All right, so if I go to my VENEU screen here, let's see. Can you guys? You can't see that cursor. I'm gonna just do it here. Oops. We are a little cursor challenged here. All right, so you can see the channel that I've highlighted there is actually my first violin that I've captured and stored in my template, okay? Now keep in mind what is in that violin. There's going to be grouping information in that violin. There's going to be obviously equalization. There's going to be time, delay time for the channel. There's going to be, you know, other grouping information. There might be VCA assignment as well. But I'm going to take that channel now and I'm going to move it. And I'm going to move it right up to the very first slot. So I'm going to highlight it, and then I'm going to go say insert here. Insert blank strip. Oops, not insert blank strip. Move selected strip here. All right. So now I've got the first violin in channel 1, which is where I want it to be on my sheet. And then of course we're gonna need to duplicate that to a number of channels, right? So we've got to get it in channels 1 through 8. So I'm going to leave it selected, and then I'm going to go select these other channels. Oops, let's do this. All right, and I'm going to right-click on the original channel and copy that violin, and then I'm going to paste it to these selected strips. Okay. So now, as you can see, all of these are going to be violin. Now, the only thing that didn't come across with them is color, which I'm going to change. I'm going to make them all the right color so I can keep track of it, right? And then the other thing that didn't change is the name, right? I've got to name each one of these as well. Just to keep things moving along, and you can always finesse this later if you want, I'm just going to call them all the same thing right now. So I'm going to copy that, and then tab, copy, tab, copy, tab, copy. Oops. Right? Get the anal part of me going here. Yep. All right. So our first violins are done. Now, in terms of second violins, I don't really have a second violin channel. It's not that dramatically different than the first violins, other than the level that they might be balanced. So I'm going to go ahead and take first violin and copy him down to the second violins as well, which is 15, looks like, oh, I'm sorry, 9 through 14. So I'm going to copy this channel and go highlight 9, oops, 11, 12, 13, 14, and paste. Okay, and then here I might want to indicate that this is actually a second violin, so I'll paste that in there, but I'll put a 2 in front of it just for my knowledge. Copy it again, and then off we go to paste. Through 14, I believe it was, right? Okay, and then I want to get my color back in there as well. A reminder, if you guys have a question at any point, please use the hand raising mechanism, and hopefully I'll see it and get you in there. All right, so we're down to second violins now. Oops, whoops. Ugh. I did this wrong here. These are not patched yet, so we don't want to give them color. All right, everybody with me so far? All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute these as well. All right, what's next on our list? It is going to be violas, and I know I have a template of viola. I'm going to go back to my channels here. Let's see what I've got. Yes, I'm almost sure I have a viola. Maybe I don't. Where is it here? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so viola, I'm actually going to take and move again. So we're going to move that up to here. I could just copy and paste it, but you might as well use those channels that you have. Otherwise, you're just going to have to go erase them later. Right? Oops, strip here, and that's wrong. It needs to be here. All right, and I need to do one other really important thing here, and I believe me, I've messed this up more than I care to admit. But we want to go save this as something other than our template. Otherwise, we're going to write over our template here. So I'm going to save a new file and call it Lab 5 template build. Okay, so now we're working on that. That way our template is safe and secure. We don't really have to worry about overwriting anything on it. Okay, so viola is in slot 15, which is where it belongs, and then we need the violas all the way out to slot 20. So we're going to copy that. Let's see, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We are going to paste it. We are going to colorize it, and we are going to name it. And you can do this naming later if you want to do it. I'm just going to do it this way, just hopefully keep you guys' head in the game here. Another good thing about colorizing it, as you see, is that you can know where your end point is. Once your color ends, you know you're at the end of that. All right, so let's go get cellos now. I'm going to go get the cello. Where is he? Hopefully I saved a cello. I may not have, actually, now that I think about this. Well, I do not have a cello, so I'm actually going to take a copy of the bass, because if you just look at it, EQ-wise, it's very, very similar to what I'm probably going to end up with on cello. It's certainly a good starting spot. Another thing I'll point out for you guys on here is if you take a look right in the center of my screen, is that there's dynamics built into this as well. If you look, I've got some really just slight expansion going on all of these string mics, right? It's only about 4 dB of threshold, very little range in it, or I mean 4 dB of range, excuse me, and you know, kind of long hold times, etc. And this is just to quiet down those mics when they are not playing, right? So it's, you know, it's essentially a noise gate, but it's a really low ratio, really you know, easy threshold. It's easy for them to get back out of it. And you know, when you take about 20 mics and turn them each down 4 dB, that's a difference in your mix when they're not playing, I assure you. All right, so I'm just going to copy that cello channel, I mean that bass channel, and use it as my cello inputs for this particular guy. And let's see, get up here. I'm going to move that here. And we need to rename it. I'm going to rename it cello. Spelled right, but that's all right too. And then how many cello mics we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3. And there's our cellos, complete with dynamics. Amber, Patch Bay. All right, our next is the actual bass channels, so that works out good. We could just go back and select 3 bass channels and paste that there as well. And let's see if I moved that. Did I move it? I did. Good boy. All right, so, oops. So 3 bass channels, and oh, I did that already, sorry. Amber. And I know these channels have the same amount of processing time on them because they have identical inserts. So that, hence that 632 that you see there. And if we go back to inputs, that should be there. Yeah, you see that 632 time up there. All right, where do we go from here? We got a blank channel there, so we're just going to leave that channel blank. And then we move into backing vocals. Let's go find a backing vocal channel now. I think my color for backing vocals is blue. Yes, blue for backing vocals. All right, so I'm going to take and move this channel up there. Selected strip here. All right, so I've got 3 backing vocalists. So I'm going to just take that and copy that to the next 3 channels. Make it blue. And obviously, you know, once you get on site and you get some people's names and other info in here, you can put that in there as well if you want. All right, I'm going to overwrite the show file just to stay on top of it. Let's see. Next, we have some Pro Tools inputs. All right, and you know, you can get crazy keeping Pro Tools inputs, but you know, a lot of the shows that I've done have been broken down into really kind of, you know, just kind of different things. I knew there was going to be strings on this, so I kept this from a previous orchestra thing that I did where they were supporting it with Pro Tools. But if you look at my Pro Tools tracks here, it's Pro Tools strings, left and right, brass, left and right, meaning horns. There's some sequences that run left and right. There's also an open Pro Tools 7, or actually Pro Tools 8 is a click. So what they've asked for here is, let's see, I bet it's going to be really close to that. Actually, it's going to be exactly that. So yeah, actually that makes sense because this is the same producer that I worked with on the previous show, so they would have had the same setup. So we're going to take those Pro Tools inputs and get them into the right position to patch in from the stage rack. So I'm going to take all of those. And we're just going to move them up into the right position here, which is right after our backing vocals. All right, so Pro Tools is in place now. What else we got here? We've got a Mickey Hart playback. All right, so this I know I don't have necessarily a channel for, but I'm just going to take one of these stereo channels that I've pre-built, and I'm going to move it into that slot. Just strip here. All right, so that should be in. Let's check that. And then we have an acoustic guitar. So I'm going to check that. Let's see here. I'm going to find an acoustic. It's probably going to be. So I store 2 different types of acoustic in my show, my template. I store one that is dry, meaning there's no insert on it, and I'll rely on bus-driven reverb for it. Or I have one that is wet, and notice on this particular one, it has an insert on it. It has a deverb inserted on it that I just blend. I just use that, especially on if it's a pretty tough feeling DI. Sometimes some of the pickups don't sound necessarily that great. I'll put a really small room on that deverb and just try to give that DI some life and just blend it wet to dry right on the piece. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to actually take that here. I don't know that that's going to be the case that I need it there, but I'm going to start there. If I need to change it later, I can just put the dry one in its place or take the deverb off and put in the correct delay time. So that would go here. Now, notice this stereo one I've left kind of blankish looking, right? That's because I don't have anything preset for it. That's an indicator to me that I'm going to have to do all of the goods to that. I'm going to have to find out what it is exactly, how I should get it to the outputs, what kind of treatment it's going to need. I know very little about it. It's just a playback from what I can understand, but that's all I know about it right now, so I won't do anything to it. But I'll also leave it color blank just to kind of be an indicator to me, okay, you're going to have to go deal with that. Don't get hung up on it, don't get stuck. All right, the next set of inputs are all vocal RFs. These are all going to be, I'm going to guess, lead vocal RFs. We have 10 of them in place. So I got to go get a lead vocal channel here. So here's a lead vocal, and I do 2 different lead vocal types here as well that are based on the amount of processing that I might need on them. I do a set that have a dynamic EQ on them and some that don't have dynamic EQ on them, just to save me some DSP space if I need it. On this, I'm just going to go ahead and you know, I'll probably make at least 6 of them, the ones with the dynamics, and the remaining 4 the other. So if you notice on this lead vocal with dynamic EQ right now, it's an AE400 followed by an LA2A followed by a de-esser. Okay, pretty simple chain, but it worked really good on this kind of a show. So I'm going to take that and move it up to that spot. Right, and then I'm going to copy it to the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. Oops. Now, the thing you have to note here is that there is no plugins on these channels that I pasted, right? I'm going to have to go match those plugin sets to those channels. I'm going to have that processing instantiated and actually go patch it. So if we go up there, I won't take the time to do all of this now. But if we go up there, you'll notice that I have one set that is already patched in, but I'll have to go find another set and patch them in. And I've got these pre-instantiated already in this show file. So notice, let's see here, where's my first one? I've got them a little out of whack here, obviously. Where are you, sir? There you are. So there's the one that that is instantiated and inserted already. I'll have to go back and instantiate patch these other sets into those other vocals. So I would go here, insert wherever that channel is, and be back. Where are you? Here. Yeah, it would be here, and then I'll put the other 3 right in line with it. I'll go ahead and do it here. Go ahead. Do these on 43. Right. And go to patch bay. Okay, so for these remaining ones, notice that I have a lead vocal that's set up without that dynamic EQ on it, but it's still got the LA2A and the de-esser on it. I'm going to use that for the remainder of these vocals. I'm just going to make an assumption that I'm not going to have 10 lead vocalists on any given song. Remember, this is going to be a multi-act show, so really probably only ever going to have 1 or 2 lead vocalists on at a time. So we'll just pick the RF mic that we need for any of the vocalists. So let me move that back up now. So now we're going to put that here. All right, so here's our one with the reduced processing on it, and we need 4 of those. All right, and I'm going to leave those. I'm going to just, because I kind of know how I work here, I'm just going to leave these uncolored right now to indicate that I've got something to do on it, patchwork to do on it. 53 through 56 here are unpatched. They are open holes on the snake. Now, it's also worth noting that we got an extra challenge here in that we're working on analog split here. This is not a digital input shared or gain track system, and it's 56 channel splitters where we have a 64 channel stage rack. So what that's going to mean in our patch bay is that we're only going to use up 1 through 56 of the patch bay or the stage rack and then move on to the other rack, right? So we won't be able to just do a completely correlated patch here. We won't be able to use the button per se to patch all of the stage racks together here. We'll have to do them one at a time. All right, so now that we've got these in place, we'll go ahead and make our first patch here. I believe that's our first stage rack that is patched here. So we could do this. We could use the patcher here. We're going to go ahead and do it, but we need to unpatch 57 through 64. And I'm going to tell you why. Give you a little insight into a little trick here that you might just save your butt someday. As it sits right now, if we're going to virtual sound check this, or we're going to record it even, and we want to have 128 tracks of record, well, if we leave it patched as it is right now, where you've got 57 through 64 patched, you're going to waste 8 tracks of recording nothing, right? Because you know, the virtual sound check and the Pro Tools record is going to build expecting inputs here. So one thing we're going to do is unpatch them. But if you want to be able to have your next input, which will be input 57 or stage rack 1, pick up at 57 in Pro Tools, you actually need to go in and disconnect the ribbons from that last input card in the stage rack. The Pro Tools has to not see those pre's in any way. So I know we're working on a way to not have to be so medieval with it there, but if you want to be able to record 128 tracks across 3 stage racks, that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to unplug that card. Okay, so just so you know, just keep that in the back of your mind in the event that you would have to do that someday. All right, so as you can see right now, we've built all of those inputs and patched them. They are ready to go. And off we go to our next stage rack, which is going to be drums, etc. So let's do that. How are we doing on time here? We're doing okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to the stage rack. That starts with drums now, and this will be 57. We will start at stage rack 2 here. All right, so stage rack 2 and inputs, and let's see here. I've got to find out where I finish here. 6 right there. So I'm going to just insert a blank strip here just to give me a little visual indicator. And then we're going to go to our drums. The first thing we start off with is kick out, kick in, snare top, snare bottom. We only have 2 tom-toms on this. Looks like tom 1 and a floor tom. So drummer after my own heart. Then we have an overhead left and right, and then we move to bass. Okay. All right, so let's get down and get the drum kit. All right, so here we go. Kick out, kick in, snare top, snare bottom, hat, tom 1. Obviously, we won't need these other channels. I've got 2 overhead choices in my template scheme. One is like a stereo Royer that works over the kit as a room simulation, and the other is just a split pair of 414s. I'm going to be using the 414s here. So let's go get these. So we're going to select these, hats, tom 1, and then I've got to get to floor tom. Don't need the Royer, but do need the overhead. Okay, and then we're going to put these in place. And those need to go in place right here. All right, so there's the drum kit moved into place. No need for naming, anything like that. That should be all patched and ready to go. After that, we've got a bass guitar. Let's go get him. So we've got a bass DI and a bass mic. We're not using a mic today. We're just going to take the DI. So we're going to move that up. And that's got to go here. All right. We'll get through a few more of these. You know, in the essence of saving time, I think you guys kind of get the drill here. We don't necessarily need to do everything, and I'll take you through and show you the rest of the goodness that you get from this. But we'll carry on. We'll do a few more here. So maybe we'll get through some guitars and some keys. Let's see. I've got Alan vocoder. No, that's not us. Sorry. That's wrong. There we go. All right, then we go into some percussion. That'll be interesting. Okay, so let's go get some percussion. Let's see what we've got here. We've got congas. Let's see, and that's going to start here. So we got a conga, 3 congas. Okay, I've got that preset. I've got that from a previous show. Bongos, timbales, hand percussion. Yeah, I've got a lot of these already pre-built. All right, so I'm going to take these now. And, you know, no copy and pasting here. We're just taking the actual channels that we've used before and using them again. All right, so that is going to go here after bass. Is that right? So I made a boo-boo here. That is going to go after the drums. So I need to do this. Selected strips here. So I copied that bass into the wrong position. So I'm just going to keep moving it on down till I get to it. Looks like we got a glockenspiel and a timpani here. That's going to be interesting to deal with. Let's see what we got in our orchestra stuff. Do I have any? All right, it doesn't look like I have anything pre-built for that, so we'll go back and build one. So it looks like we need for a glockenspiel, which will be a mono instrument, that'll be this guy, and a timpani, and that'll be this guy. So we'll just leave that as, actually, I'm going to just name it for now and leave it blank as if I've got to go do something with it. Oops, not tyranny, timpani. And we've got this as a glockenspiel. All right, so I'm going to leave those blank as if I've got to do something with them, but they are already named. And then we've got a blank channel, and then we've got the bass guitar. So we should be there. And we do have an amp too. I thought so. I thought I saw that. I was just looking at the wrong part of the list. Okay, so now our bass is in place. Now, actually, I'll go ahead and put some guitars in place so you guys can see that as well, and then we'll stop there. All right, so the next amp, our next is a stereo guitar followed by 2 acoustics. So we'll do that first. Guitars, dry electric, 2. Yeah, we'll just do this guy. All right, so this is 2 guitar channels, and that's all I need for this particular guitar that are already going to be patched and set into my guitar scheme. So we have bass, and then it comes right up to the bass. What? Did I boo-boo here? I might have. Oh, there's my old viola channel. I found it. Nice.
So your templates include subgroups and VCAs?
Yep. Yeah, it sure does, which I'm going to show you next. That's why I'm going to cut this just a little short so I can show you that. I don't want to run out of time here. Ah, I see what I did. I made that stereo.
Hey, Robert.
Oh, yes.
Somebody asked earlier on the chat, why do you use copying channels like this instead of using the library?
You could use the library if you wanted to do it. But I'm essentially doing the same thing if I'm working from the channel itself, right? And remember, in the channel library, it does not store plugins, right? So if you have a channel that has plugins inserted on it and you store it in the library, it does not keep the plugins. That's why I keep the actual channels that I built and just move them up and copy and paste them, right? You follow me there? So I just kind of do it that way so I don't have 2 methods. So I hope that makes sense to you. See if I can get my act together here. All right, so there's our guitar channels, and they should be good to go. All right, so as you can see, as we move along here, I'm using up a bunch of these extra channels as they happen. And at some point, you know, I will either use up all the channels or I will have enough left over to do like production RFs and talkbacks and all kinds of things, although I have talkbacks already built into my paths as well. So let's just have a quick overview look here. I'll go back to the overview page to look at it. So notice now we've kind of we've got all of these things in order in terms of their patch on the patch list. And I'll actually go put some space in here to remind me that that is the stop. So we've patched up to this blank spot here. And as you guys might recall from the last week, I was talking about, I think certainly in the context of S6L, but any console where you have programmable layouts or custom layouts, I would really encourage you, when you're laying out your console, think in terms of inputs first, right? So notice that my layout right now, and I hesitate to even call it a layout, my channel layout right now is the patch, right? Channel 1 is going to be patched from Snake Channel 1. Channel 57 is going to be Snake Channel 57. Right on down the line. It allows you to leave this in a one-for-one as you're working, and it becomes much easier to patch and much easier to troubleshoot, right? So even if we go now to this second set of patches that we've made on stage rack 2, and we've got one channel off there, but we're going to live with it today. So kick out starts at channel 56, all right, 57, excuse me, channel 57. Well, channel 57 in our situation is channel 1 of stage rack 2. Channel 57 is channel 1 of stage rack 2. Everybody follow me there? So here I am in stage rack 2. I'm going to go to channel 1 and patch in the kick drum, and then just patch on down, right? And I can be sure that this is right if I can actually do it here. Get to there. Oops. Faux pas. Let's try one more time. Okay. This is blank. All right, everybody follow me there? So, like I said, you want to keep it one-for-one there for a number of reasons. And I'll show you here why I'm saying that. Number one is certainly that you want to be able to troubleshoot quickly. If somebody says, hey, I don't have channel 12, you know exactly that that is channel 12 on your input faders, right? If we were to look here, back over here for a second. Just put this up a little bit. If I'm in inputs on my console, I know that channel 12 is fader 12 is the channel that is patched in to channel 12, right? It's one-for-one. So it makes it very easy to go track something down. If you have customized layouts, you're going to use those to lay out the channels the way you want them for any given song or any given application, right? But in inputs, it's all one-for-one. I know that channels 1 through 8 are plugged into Snake channels 1 through 8. I know that channels, where are we going to go here, 57, right on down, are the kick into the percussion and right on down the line there, right? So it helps you troubleshooting-wise. And we have one other advantage for that as well, which is if we have a Pro Tools recorder attached to it, and we build the session in Pro Tools based on our input patch, it will patch it up exactly like this as well, and patch it one-for-one, meaning track 1 will be mic 1, track 2 will be mic 2, track 57 will be microphone 57. It'll all be one-for-one. Inside Pro Tools, you can very easily make a collated patch. You could patch all the outputs to a left-right if you wanted to start creating a mix there, and then create them right back to 1 through 128 if you needed it, right? With just a couple of keystrokes, you wouldn't have to go in and do menu drop-downs or pick clusters of channels and patch those to a given position. It becomes very easy and very fluid to get back and forth if you need to do it. Matter of fact, one of the things we're going to do is build a Pro Tools session from VENEU Link today, and you'll see this in action, okay? So let's see, I got to go repair one thing I did wrong here, which was I think I needed an extra channel before my drum kit. Yes, channel 55. But do we have stereo in there? Yes, we do. Okay, so that is right. All right. All right, so now here's the kind of the proving point, right? Just getting your inputs in position is just job one. That's the first thing you need to do. But once you do that, like we're at this point right now, I would feel absolutely fine having a band come up on stage and start going through a line check. Now, keep in mind, I haven't assigned anything yet, right? Short of just those little inputs that we said, I didn't know what that was. I'll have to figure out what that was. So let's test that theory right here. So one of the things I do with layouts, especially with S6L, because we have so many available to you. Remember, you have 999 snapshotable layers. Well, you also have another 48 available to you on the console, right? And I use them to kind of create signal paths, right? Or review signal paths. So like if I press my drums layout, all of the things that are drums and their signal path is in this layout. So if you'll notice here on the left-hand side, this is all inputs up to about right here. This is the three auxiliaries that drive. One is for my parallel returns, for compression, etc. The other is for effects processing, for a drum room and a drum plate. These are the aux masters for that. There's another auxiliary that I call GOO, which is some extreme snare drum processing. That's another aux master. These two channels here are kick, snare, and tom's return. This is the bridge that's going to allow me to align it to this parallel processed path, right? So this is kick, snare, and tom's dry, kick, snare, and tom's parallel in terms of processing. So a lot of, compression, EQ, etc. Here is that GOO return. And then these are the effects returns: drum room, drum plate. This is the drum audio subgroup. This is the pro sub subharmonic, which if you remember when we did our alignment, this goes directly up to the matrix. And then this is the mains left-right fader. And then on down the line, actually I don't have it in this particular layout, but I would normally have it. I would have my matrices show up here as well, so I could see the path all the way through. But we'll take it right to the mains left-right today. So if I were to get signal into any one of these drum inputs that we've got patched in and turn it on, it should automatically make it all the way to the output without me having to do anything. So let's test that here. I'll go turn some noise on and patch it in. Now I'm going to have to patch it in to channel 1, or my snare drum here. I'll just use the snare drum because it's the most complex path. So let's go up. I need to get to the snare. Notice it's patched into mic 3. I'm actually going to use the console and patch some noise into that channel now. Right? Turn it on. Oops. All right, so there you see some noise hopefully coming into that channel. And as I turn it up now, it should light up the entire path if I've got it open, which I should. And there you see it. It's making it out the auxes at the level that I've chosen. It's making it to my parallel returns. It's making it all the way to my effects returns. It's making it to the drum subgroup, all the way out to the left-right master. There are drums going to the pro sub. It's making it as well. And if I pull the matrix up into this, which I'll just do here, let's just pull our left-right matrix up here. Sorry. Oops. Cancel. Okay, so now we see the main matrix that is driving my left-right. If you can kind of see that through the camera, I'll try to move this out of the way a little bit. If I were to open this up, hopefully this isn't coming to you, but now we see that that is post the left-right master, right? So you have the entire signal path sitting right here in front of you to check it. And it just proves that all we did was move those microphones or those channels into position, plug microphones into them, turn them on, and they're ready to go to the path, right? You're already ready to start mixing. It's the festival mindset is exactly what this is, right? Okay? So there you have it. Let's check another one. You want to check another one? Let's go look at, well, actually, let's back up one. So obviously, I've unpatched the microphone from my snare drum right now and used noise to check it. And honestly, guys, if you're going to do that time alignment procedure, this is how you would do it, right? You're going to put noise in here just to check what you're doing is right. Remember, I've got a pre-alignment going on here, but if I ever wanted to check it, I could just patch noise into any channel and check it through my FFT path, right? But if we were going to go repatch this now, well, now we've got to know what channel the snare was originally patched into, right? Well, if we keep everything one for one, we know that that snare was patched right here, right? Because we know it's in a one-for-one look. So I'm going to just double click it, and now we're back on the microphone. The only thing that I've got to set here once we get going is preamp level. All right, that's the only thing that's out of play here. And even on those channels where I copy and paste, it doesn't necessarily paste preamp level as well. As soon as you patch in someplace into the stage rack, your preamp level is done. You're going to need to reset it. But you know, it doesn't matter, guys. I mean, every show I do that's new, you're going to be setting preamp levels on it regardless. So I just don't care. I know I'm going to have to set them anyway. So the main portion, or the main important part that I want to make sure of is that, okay, all of my path is right, all my assignments are right, my VCA assignments are right, etc. Let's take a look at another one just to kind of prove the point of that. Let's maybe look at, let's see if I screwed this up here. Let's go look at the guitars. All right, so that we've got these two guitar channels that need noise in them to just see if they're going to be going through the right place. So here we go. So I'm going to unpatch here and patch noise into both these channels. Now remember, this is two guitars in this situation. So I'm going to patch some noise in there. Oops. And I'm going to go to my guitars layout, and here it is, right? So this is the entire path for my guitars all the way out to the main left, right. Whoops, sorry. So here's my two channels coming in. Now I'll let you in on something ahead of time. The way I do guitars in these kind of situations is that these guitars do not route directly anywhere, right? And this is what's going to allow me to do this. They actually get into a rhythm versus solo kind of path setup that I have so that I can manage that really easily for any guitar player. So we're just going to treat these as two mics coming in. Maybe it's a 57 and a 421. I don't know. We won't know that till we get there. But if I turn them on, they automatically go out to my setups here. So notice that they're going to go out auxiliaries and return to three channels, right? It's going to be three channels. One is labeled guitar drive. One is labeled guitar solo. One is labeled guitar stereo, right? At any point, I can make these two inputs that go up here stereo or mono just by manipulating delay time on these two channels. If they're the same time, it comes up center. If I push this out 10 milliseconds and pan it, then they go out wide. The difference is that I have a situation where I can set up a VCA to be in control of my solo channel, turn it up, and, oh, sorry, I got it backwards here, it's over here. So this is my rhythm channels down, this is my solo channel down. Solo up, rhythm down, solo down, rhythm up. All of that is pre-built and ready to go. All you got to do is plug in a couple of mics and turn them on, right? Ready to go. Same with effects processing. It's all there, ready to go, right? So again, I didn't have to think about any of that. It's all kind of pre-built and good. All I got to do is get the mics plugged in to the right thing, okay? Let's see, what else there? Oh, Reggie, I'm sorry, dude. How long have you had your hand up there? I got sidetracked and didn't see you. Jump in there, buddy. Sorry.
Quick question.
Yeah, go. I'll grab a drink.
So I spend a lot of my downtime, like rebuilding these templates. And the person talked about the library. And I rely on the library. Is there another way that, like, say you just, you've got like a string you like sound or something like that, or some input you like, yeah, and you want to take that channel and import it into your template. Is there another way of doing it other than just looking at the console, looking at that file, seeing how that's set up, dump some stuff to your library, and then copy it over?
You can certainly do it that way. I think, honestly, I've done it both ways, and I think that's the more difficult way. I think it's less intuitive doing it that way. Because I know if I've got those inputs built and just sit in the console built, and then I'm going to use them or copies of them, that at least for my brain, that's way more intuitive, you know.
So how do you get it? How do you transport it over?
Transport it over from where?
how do you take your said string file from a show that you've just done and get that input over to your template?
Well, in that situation, I might use the library, but I'm going to do it with some mental notes as well, especially if it's got plugins on it, etc. Right? So yeah, in that situation, if you're going to go from a show file to your template, that's a different deal. Yeah. Then you're almost bound to use the library if you want to do it there.
Gotcha. Because I've got these libraries just all stacked up and with notes on them, and then at the end of the year, I come home and I start to move stuff over, and that pretty much takes a bunch of the template time up, just recreating new templates every year, which is good.
Yeah, which is fine. It's fine, sure. Yeah, like I said, I just don't work from the libraries with few exceptions inside the template. The template is kind of my library. But if you're bringing stuff in, like how did I get those strings and other things in there? Yeah, I brought them in from a library from another show file. Sure. Yeah. Does that make sense to you? Did we confuse the issue there?
No, you got me. I got it. Thanks.
Matter of fact, I'll give you another example here. Pavan, I'll be right with you here. So let's say for some of the effects processing, that's probably a good example as any. So, I've already got effects returns built, for drums, for vocals, for everything. Well, in those situations, just to kind of get me started, yeah, I'll probably work from the libraries there. So let's go down to maybe like a backing vocal, a lead vocal reverb here. That's probably a good place to look. So I'm using Revibe for my vocal reverbs, but for Revibe, I'll already have a set of pre-built scenarios for it, right? So I'll have a long, medium, and short chamber, a long, medium, short plate, a short and medium room, just depending on what style of music it is, what I want to get, and just use that as a starting place, right? Now, the other piece that's important to remember here as we go forward, and I don't want to jump around too much because I want to kind of try to do this in order, is that you're going to want to build a show file that's got the base set of plugins that you're going to, not a show file, excuse me. You're going to want to build a snapshot that's got the base set of plugins that you might want to recall within this show already built into it, right? And you're gonna work from this snapshot, meaning when you're ready, you've got something kind of built, you're gonna duplicate this and store it, and that's gonna be your first snapshot, right? And it's only gonna recall layout and plugins right now. If you want to start adding other things to that snapshot, you obviously need to add and scope channels as you go. But it's important not to just work from a new snapshot there because it will not contain any of those plugins. You won't be able to store them until you get them in there, right? Everybody good there? I made that mistake for a long time working with this thing. Only do it so many times. So I'll always have a snapshot that is all of the plugins that I feel like I'm probably going to need to be recalls on, already kind of preloaded. It'll have my basic layout in there that I'm going to start with, which in this situation is a layout that is all of my groups and VCAs. So I think right to about here, these are all audio subgroups. This is all, actually this is just some individual returns that I had built in here. This is all VCAs, and this is my lead vocal chains. So I'm probably starting somewhere there. I would probably manipulate a little bit of this before I got started, but that's usually my fundamental layout that is going to be fundamental to probably all of the things going forward in the show has some element of this in it. It has some element of audio subgroups, some element of VCAs in it. That kind of stuff is really easy to manipulate on site and do it. You can only get so far here, right? But gain structure wise, this is important to discuss. Given that I've got everything grouped already, if I use the same approach to getting input gain and setting gain throughout those individual paths that I showed you with my layouts, then this gain structure is legitimate, right? Look at where lead vocal is compared to drums, right? There's probably, I don't know, maybe 15 dB of difference between those at the subgroup level, right? So if I just use a consistent method for getting input gain on those inputs, we're all good. We're all good. It's going to work out great. All right. So we kind of covered the thing there. Let me have a look at what else I got to make sure I do here. All right, so we're going to do the Pro Tools thing yet. Any more clarification on anything there? Like I said, we made it all the way through the vocals. We didn't get really any of the production inputs done there. But man, if I had to have a band walk up on stage right now, I could start setting gain and start making music here pretty quickly. Let me get this zoomed back down here a little. All right. Well, let's do this. Let's build a Pro Tools session from this. What do you say? Just to kind of drive home that point of how powerful the one-for-one is. Let me see if I can get my Pro Tools computer up here. Yeah, there we go. Can you guys, are you guys seeing a thing that says AVB record there? I just want to make sure you guys can see that. Yeah, okay, good. All right, I'm going to have to get off mic here for just a sec. Actually, I can probably do it there. Let me see if I can do it from the screen share. This will be fun to try. I'm going to do this. Now, I have to go over here to do it. All right, so we're going to create a new session. All right, notice that I've got VENEU Link established here. So the tab, the drop down that allows me to choose Create from VENEU is in play, right? And then Lab 5 template build is the name of the show file, so it's just given us that, which is fine, we can use that. So I'm just going to say, okay, go ahead and create, right? And I think we actually, let me make sure I repatched that guitar. I don't think I did. Let's do that. So whatever's going to show up, this, and you would want to have this done before or after all of your input patches, that certainly the ones that you're going to record are patched. Because remember, it's going to base its track build based on your input patch. All right. Okay, so we're going to say we're all patched now, and we're going to go over here and say create, and it's going to start building our Pro Tools session based on our input names and our input patch.
Hey Robert, quick question.
Go.
Do you record your summed groups into Pro Tools as well, and do you just direct out on the Pro Tools side of the patch bay for that?
If I've got the track headroom, I absolutely do. I almost always give that to somebody, want to give that to somebody. I mean, I'll record wet and dry, 2 tracks, mix minus 2 tracks, and subgroups if I've got the track headroom to do it. Yeah.
10-4. Thank you. And
Yeah,
do you drive your groups with the VCA, or do you keep those separate?
There are VCA moves that happen within 2 instruments within those subgroups. So, you know, I might have matter of fact, we'll look at that here once let me get back on camera and I'll show you how to do that. Stand by.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So as you can see here, it's gone ahead and built the session, and it's labeled it up, and it's in the exact same order that we just made it, right? It started with violins, moves right on down through drums, even got the blank channel in there, got our stereo channels in there. You can see the entire thing is built out to input 91, right? So, you know, as long as we have those things patched in the rack, it's going to create a track for them. So, you know, that was, I mean, that would be an hour easy worth of work right there just to label and patch that session if you didn't have VENEU Link do it there, right? So, again, that's kind of working from, I don't necessarily work from a template in Pro Tools. I know there are guys that do that, and there's certainly validity to it. But usually, if I'm out on tour, etc., I will just create from VENEU every day. You know, that way, if we have guests show up and I make additional patches, I don't have to worry about whether the Pro Tools template is updated to the guest inputs or if they're labeled correctly or whatever. I just, you know, if Lucinda Williams shows up, I got her guitar, her vocals labeled, patched, create a new session, and they show up there labeled that way, ready to go, right? Believe me, I missed Stevie Nicks' vocal once and didn't get it recorded. I never made that mistake again. So I'm alive to talk about it. All right, what else do we need to look at here, guys? Oh, I was going to show you VCAs within the group, right? And, you know, we could probably save some of this discussion for another discussion, which will focus almost entirely on this. let's go back to guitars again. Let me patch the noise back up because I don't have any track information here. Just so you can kind of see this work. All right, so we're going to look at a pair of guitars. Again, I'm going to turn those up. And again, these are my return channels. Well, in my guitar world, even though all of these guitars, meaning guitar left, guitar right, and guitar solo, are all assigned to the same subgroup. Sorry, let me get it back on camera. Somebody speak up if I get lost here. There we go. And I'll blow this back up a little bit. All right, so we're back to these guitars being patched in, right? So this is 57, 421, whatever. And it routes out to my auxes and returns to these paths and is set up all in this really cool way. Well, I have a VCA that operates within that subgroup. And that VCA is only operating the guitar solo channel, right? So there is a master level for the guitars. Remember, this is my mains left, right. This is master level for the guitars. And then there is a solo level, a guitar solo level, that when I turn it up, it turns down other faders. Can you see those faders moving down there, or do I need some more light on that? I need some more light on that. Let me see if I can put a little light up this way. It's tough to see it. I'll go back to this. Hang on one second. We're manipulating on the fly here. This is pretty cool stuff. Let me get back to this. Okay, so on screen, and I'll try to get over here and annotate it. Oops. Smooth, man, smooth. All right, so here's those return channels. So those 4 channels that you see there are these 4 channels right here. Okay, these guys right here. And the VCA is attached to that solo channel. You can kind of see that VCA being in control of that center solo channel, right? So as I turn it up, it's going to turn down my rhythm channels. But so this VCA is only in charge of the guitar solo, but it's actually manipulating rhythm as well. And this is all happening within this audio submaster. You follow me there? So there's an audio submaster that would be, this would be the master level for all guitars within that group. But VCA, I might have another VCA that's in charge of an acoustic that is inside that group too if I needed it, right? It just depends. It just depends on the situation. So this is master level for all of this guitar that I'm calling guitar 1. I don't necessarily, in this situation in particular, I wouldn't necessarily combine all guitars into one subgroup, but I could do that if I wanted to. I've got separate subgroups for them. So in that situation, again, there's just VCAs that operate within that subgroup. The VCA is not necessarily in charge of the subgroup. I'll give you another good example that is probably actually even a better example. Let's go here. Let me get back to my bass layout. So here we see, let me go here. Orchestra groups. Okay, so on the console now, let's jump back up to this. All right, so this wouldn't necessarily be ready to mix this particular piece of music, but it'll give you some sense of how that works. So I have a strings subgroup, audio subgroup. I have a brass and winds audio subgroup. So this is a master level for strings versus winds and brass, right? That would go to the left, right. But I've also got a VCA that is in charge of all orchestra groups. So here's an orchestra percussion that is also a group. So that was all the orchestra percussion. So this VCA here is actually in charge of all 3 of these blends. And these are subgroups, right? So this is like my orchestra blend and then a master volume for the orchestra. You follow me there? So that's a situation where the VCA is actually in charge of the groups, not necessarily in there. But inside of those, like inside of the strings per se, I don't know how I can show you this actually. Give me 1 second. I'll just put it down here so you can see it. if I go to VCAs, I have actually got another set of VCAs that would come to life. They would come to the foreground if I was mixing the orchestra for a given song. So let me just put them up here for you. Yeah. Sorry, my bad. This is kind of an as needed. So these red faders that you see down here are also VCA, but this is a VCA for all brass, all winds, first violins, second violins, violas, cellos, bass orchestra, right? So I could do a blend there if I needed to ride first violins up, which you would normally have to do. You would be all over that in a given orchestra situation. Then I can ride those as a VCA. Remember, that's probably 16 channels or at least 8, 10 channels of violins that I have control of with that one VCA. But as we move down, the entire volume for the strings is here, and then the entire volume for the orchestra is here in VCA. You get me there? I know it feels complex to explain, but it's actually pretty simple. And
yeah, that's great.
Kind of the way you can do it with the least amount of handles at any given moment is it will make you allow you to mix really dynamically. It works out really good. All right, how are we doing on time here? Well, we're at about an hour 35, which is more than I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. So let's. I think we can probably stop there. Are you guys getting that? Maybe I'll show you one other thing here, because it's worth mentioning this, because this is certainly a big portion of my template, is talking about outputs and how you handle those. So if we were to go to my outputs page here, remember, like I said, all mixes go down, with the exception of immersive. We're going to leave that out of the conversation. That's for another day. But all mixes go down to either a mono or a stereo, or a mono plus stereo plus a sub output, or something along those lines. It's going to break down to that at some point, and then it's just a matter of distribution. So what I do in my show files is I have my matrices already pre-built as well. So if you look at this matrix that I have right in front of you here, notice that it takes a number of things and blends them together. And this is my main left-right PA drive, right? It has my left-right mix, which in my case is only music. That is only music that is assigned to the left-right. And then my backing vocal subgroups and my lead vocal subgroups come up separately of that. Those lead vocal subgroups and backing vocal subgroups are not assigned to the left-right bus. That allows me to process my music without impacting my vocals. Right? But look at what else is in here. Well, that pro sub return is in here. It actually should be on right now. Oh, it is. No, it's not. That should be. Oh, it is on. Okay. So the pro sub returns up there, and that's about it that goes into there. I do have the ability to put some noise directly to the matrix if I want to do it, but I don't necessarily need to do it here. Now let's go and look at some other matrices that are there, right? So the next one is the front fill. Well, front fill is empty right now, but if I was going to make it a duplicate of that, I would just drop this down and go replace with sources from left, right, main. And now that is a duplicate of my left, right that is going to that matrix. Subwoofer, in my situation, I usually just drive it from the left, right, but if you wanted to add an aux to it, whatever you wanted to do, this is the place to do it. And then after that, it's just more matrices that are just duplicates of it if I need to send them other places, right? The matrices that are media matrices, not to be confused with the PV media matrix, are all set up as well. So notice that I have a dry record that is basically exactly the same as my left-right that is driving off the matrix, including the pro sub. I have a wet record that also includes audience. So as long as I plug in audience mics into my pre-built audience channels, they're automatically going to show up there. If I use my gain setting procedure, everything should go just hunky-dory. Mix minus, so this is just music plus pro sub without the vocal groups in it. Very easy to create it when you do that. A local listen, so this is like if I have local speakers up, what's going to be in that? I've got my monitor plus my music left and right's in there, and I've got a little fancy event set up to manage those two things. Right on down to, I've got one that sometimes I'll put an expander on an overhead mic to create some more, kind of lift on a snare drum, and I have a sidechain matrix that is already built to go into that sidechain event to do that. FFT, my FFT matrices are already done, ready to go. All you gotta do is physically patch them to your smart and you're ready to go. So, you know, output-wise, it's all done as well, right? I don't have to think these things through, you know. The only changes that would happen on something like this is if you got, you know, you got producer stage announces or, you know, musical director stage announces that need to go through the PA at all times, then I would take those inputs that come into the console and feed them directly to these matrices and just leave them on, you know, because they need to be able to come through the PA anytime they want. You don't want to worry about turning them on or anything like that. You know, having them route through anything. You want them to go directly to the matrix and just have them be on all the time so that those people can talk to the staff, the audience, whatever they need to talk to, especially on these TV shows, right? Is that making sense to everybody? So again, you know, it takes no time to do that. I mean, here we are in an hour and a half teaching it, you know, and I'd be ready for musicians to start walking up and get going here at any time. So somebody asked about gain setting earlier. Let's make that the last thing we touch on, and that might set us up for another lab here coming up. I as many times as I've given this presentation on gain stage or gain management, et cetera, it feels natural that we would do that as part of a lab at some point. But for me, I always use this function on S6L called Gain Guess. We've had it on there since day one of VENEU, and I use it to set my gain religiously on the console. It has just never, ever failed me. So I'll give you a very simple example of it. We'll go into, let's just go do a drum. That's probably the easiest example to use. So let's get to a drum input. Let's go back to our magic snare drum. And I'll just patch some noise in here to drive home how to do this. Figure out where I am here. Here we go. All right, so here's our noise coming in. I'm going to turn this down just a little bit so we can actually set some gain on it. Turn down to minus 30, minus 40, something like that. Okay, and we'll get back here. And maybe, let's see if I can do this. Let me see if I can get fancy here. Where I can show it a little better. So. Okay. Now, if you look at the bottom screen, you should see that channel in kind of a big view. Yeah, you see that? I'm going to turn this all the way down for a second.
Yes, we see that.
Awesome. Awesome, in fact. I'll turn this up a little bit. Get it to about here. Okay, so you see a little bit of noise coming into that snare drum channel. Obviously, we would need to set gain there, right, to get it up to its normal level. Now, when you use this gain guess function, there's two things you need to keep in mind, and it's all in the devices page on VENEU. So you have to choose your metering ballistics, and you'll either going to choose RMS or peak ballistics, and this will impact how gain guess works. All right, so I'm going to set it to peak first, and then we're going to go gain guess this. So notice if you can see it there. I know it's a little dark to see it, but right about here, actually, let me annotate it so I can draw your attention to it. Stand by. So where you want to be looking is right about here. Right? And you should see a little question mark there. And that is the gain guess function. You can do this with the mouse click on the software, which I'm going to do here, or you can actually do it just by holding down. Like once you have signal, like once there is snare drum being played, then you would press down on the encoder until it flashes, let off, and it's automatically going to set gain for you. Okay, I'm going to do it in mouse trackball form here. So we have input going. I'm going to click on the question mark for guess and let it set it. Okay, so it's automatically set gain here. Now, here's the problem with it right now. It's set peak information to 0 dB, which in this situation, 0 dB is minus 20 dBFS line level. Okay, so right now, believe it or not, even though it looks good, our level for the snare drum is not good. It's actually about 15 dB, maybe more low, especially so with a snare drum because it's got a lot of peak information in it. So it would only set the peaks to 0 there. What you actually want to be in to do this for the vast majority of this work is in RMS, right? So if you're in RMS, notice how much lower the signal actually is. You might be able to actually see there's a little peak indicator attached to it. So I'm going to regain guess now. And now the peak indication is up around minus probably 6, maybe 8 dBFS, and our signal is sitting at minus 20 dBFS RMS, which is perfecto for what we're going to do. So I use this to set every piece of gain on every input of the console. Remember, that is your record level as well as your input level. It will just come out so great for you if you do this. Now, here's where things get a little dicey in our situation here. If we go back to our drums, let me get back to my camera for a second. Like I said, I'll do an entire lab on this if I get a lot of feedback from people that want to do it. Steve Smith, I just glanced at your question and I'm going to answer it. Yes, your Pro Tools session needs to be at 96K to record off S6L. That's correct. All right, so our snare drum is no longer here. It's down here now. And as you can see, if I turn it up, the rest of the channel path comes to life. Now, keep in mind, on this snare drum, as you can see there, I have lots of plugins in play on it that are bypassed right now. Those are things that could impact gain downstream of this microphone, right? So in that situation, you're going to be watching how it's hitting your parallel paths. And if you need more gain at the input of your parallel paths, that's where you're going to get it, not at the input stage, right? My snare drum usually sits somewhere around 0 fader-wise, maybe -2, -3, +2, -3, depending on song. But the actual gain into the group comes through those parallel paths, right? Remember, that's a path that is going to get it to the group. So obviously, I've got all the plug-in processing bypassed right now, so my gain to the group is actually very small. So I will either, one, have to, if I'm going to have a day where I'm not going to use any plugins in that input path, then I've got to make up for that gain somewhere, and it's going to be at my parallel path. It's going to be at my bridge and at my parallel path. All right, so you just got to kind of pick and choose on your drum kit when you have a path that is that complex. But I guess my point of saying it is the way that I set input gain does not change. Once it's set, period, end of story. The only time I would ever consider changing input gain or riding input gain would be maybe in a theater situation, or if I'm working television where somebody's going from a whisper out to a big thing, a big vocal, you might have to actually ride some input gain there to get it to work right. But in music, man, more often than not, once I set an input gain, it's like that till we go home. So unless something changes on the front side of it, okay? All right, I hope that answered the gain question. Like I said, I'll probably end up doing a whole lab on gain structure just to talk about that whole thing, because it's a really interesting topic, certainly today. All right. The pooch is desperate to go out. I might not make it back before you're done. Thanks for the wealth of information today. My pleasure, Kevin. We'll see you guys. Hey, listen, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys are digging these. I hope these are good information for you. All right, guys, I'm going to pull the ripcord here. Thanks for tuning in. Look for the recording and the documents if they go along with this. I'll send you out the email and let you know where it is, okay?
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
See you Wednesday.
Yeah, you got it. Bye-bye.